Well, I never thought that I'd have kids. It wasn't that I was opposed to having kids, but much like being an Olympic gymnast, it just didn't really seem within the realm of possibility. So I didn't think about it very much. And that all changed when I met Diane, who was a big kid herself and wanted to have kids so she would have other kids that she could play with. And I loved Diane, so I was all in. Now, being the fact that we were two women who wanted to have a baby, it was a little bit more complicated, and we needed a careful plan. I mean, we had a lot of X's, but we need some Y's to go along with it. We had some friends who had used a sperm bank or a sperm credit union or something like that for their kid, and sure, that was one option. But we really wanted our kid to know their dad. We wanted them to be able to look somebody and say, "That's my dad," and bring him to school on Dad and Donuts Day, rather than say, "My dad is number 41627. He's 5'11, blonde hair, brown eyes, athletic build, and has a degree in business administration." Well, wanting a known donor complicated things even further. Uh, your address book takes on a whole new meaning when you're looking for a donor dad. Like Diane was going to pick up the phone and call some ex-boyfriends and ask them if they wanted to have one last carefully timed fling. So, and at one point, we actually had two candidates to be the donor dad, causing us to have to choose between the two. And the most awkward breakup ever, right? Like, look, it's not you, it's us. I'm sure that your product and your equipment are quite capable of the job, but we've decided to just go in another direction for this position. Although it's not a position, missionary or otherwise, there's no position involved, but the job, good luck to you on your future donations and endeavors. In a twist of irony, we met the man who would become the biological father of our children through our local Catholic church. Let me explain. Diane and I were active members of our church community. She was a lector, and I taught faith formation, and our participation just seemed to be a non-event with our local Catholic church. At least nobody showed up at our door with pitchforks and torches in the hand. And but we wondered, would our children be welcomed into the church? Could they be baptized? Would they be full participation? Because Diane and I were both cradle Catholics, and I wanted my child to have full participation and be drugged kicking and screaming every Sunday of their childhood to church, just like I was. Well, we knew a couple of the priests at the church who we were friends with and knew our story, and we thought the thing to do would be to ask them if our kids would be welcome into the church. So we had them over to dinner, and then over a lovely creme brulee and some coffee, we started to broach the topic of having kids and having them in the church. And we didn't do a very good job of it leading up to the question, and we took way too long. It was awkward. It was like really bad foreplay, and at some point, it was very confusing, and they were confused, and they thought that we were about to ask one of them to be the donor dad for our children. And so we tamped that down right away and said we didn't want a father with a collar for the father. Um, and then they both started to theoretically argue which one of them would have, in theory, made the best father. So we separated them, calmed them down, and told them what we really wanted to know was, could our kids be raised in the church? And they were like, "Oh, yeah, sure, not a problem. Carry on." Well, now that we had the faith question answered, we really needed to find a known donor. Diane and I were part of a welcoming committee, as it were, for anyone who was interested, who was gay and wanted to know about the church. And we also were part of a small faith sharing community. And we would screen people who were interested in joining because, surprise, surprise, not everyone thinks that we should be welcome in the church. So we'd have some people that wanted to join our group who really didn't play for our team or didn't really like anyone who played for our team. So we devised a very scientific, careful approach where we would go out to breakfast and we would screen the candidates. And through this, we met two wonderful young men who had just moved to California. And we took them out for breakfast and asked them, very intense questions about Will and Grace, Judy Garland, a chorus line, and asked them if they knew at least 3 songs from Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Well, they passed this test with flying rainbow flag colors. They were in the group. We got to know these gentlemen over the course of the next year or so, and they became friends. And one night, after a little too much Sacramento wine, the subject turned to having children, and we talked about maybe starting a family, raising a family as a village, as it were. It was kind of our version of a drunken one-night stand. And through more conversations, we finally decided we were going to do it. We drew up a contract, which we took to a lawyer, and she said it wasn't really worth the paper it was written on, because apparently you can't have a contract for a baby that doesn't exist yet. But at least we were all on the same notarized page. Well, once that was taken care of, and it wasn't very complicated, we agreed that we wouldn't abscond with the baby to the other side of the country. And the dad agreed that he would sign away his parental rights so that I could be the second legal parent, because you can't have 3 legal parents, apparently, although that would come in handy when it came time for carpooling. But regardless, all the details signed. Now we had to get down to business. Now, I'm not talking about that business, not quite like that business. No, we use like an at-home turkey baster method, let's call it. And this involved the donor dad coming by and delivering some product, usually in a small gift bag with a bow. Gay men, am I right? And much to our all surprise, I managed to get Diane pregnant on the first try. Apparently, I had a unique gift for impregnating women. And this was a big deal. It was a big deal in our community because, I mean, a baby's always a big deal. It's always a blessed event. But it was as if we were having a baby for the entire LGBTQ community. The pregnancy, it went well. I hardly gained any weight at all. And can't say the same for Diane, but she suffered from the 7 dwarfs of pregnancy. There was weepy, crying, pouty, bloaty, farty, pukey. There's probably more than 7 dwarfs of pregnancy, but she had them all. And in the 7th month, she decided that her nesting instinct told her that we should buy a bigger house, because even though the baby was only going to be like this big, someday it would get big. And so we needed a 4-bedroom home. And you don't argue with a woman who's experiencing the 7 dwarfs of pregnancy. And so that's what we did. We sold a home, bought a home, moved, all during months 8 and 9. Finally, the big day arrived. We went to the hospital, 7 o'clock in the morning, to be greeted by Nurse Judy, who welcomed us and asked us, "Do you have a birth plan?" We were momentarily confused by this question, because really our plan was to come to the hospital with the baby inside Diane and then let the hospital work on getting the baby out of Diane. Well, Nurse Judy did assure us that that was within their wheelhouse, and I hope so, because otherwise they need to change their name, because maternity ward, that's false advertising. So Judy settles us into a lovely private room, and we say goodbye to her because she's a night nurse, and the day nurse arrives. And we call the dads and we tell them to get over there because the moment's come and this is it. And they arrive, and then, labor can often be like Thanksgiving Day. It's a big day. Everybody's very excited. Relatives are around. You've read books. Maybe you've bought some new equipment. You're very, very excited. And you wait for that turkey to be done. And you're waiting and you're waiting. And it's taking longer. And it's really not done. And you have to put it back in. And the kids are getting tired and cranky and hungry because you told them, don't eat anything. You'll ruin your appetite. But that was 8 hours ago because you really thought that turkey was going to be done. That was kind of how it was going for us. And the day nurse, Nurse Kate, she asked Diane if she wanted to take a shower. And I don't know if there was a medical reason for this or she was just trying to distract her from the contractions, but Diane wanted to look good for the big day. Although if you've ever seen a birth, you know that you really need to take that shower after the birth because it's very messy. And so we take a shower, and I'm helping Diane because helping her get in and out of the shower, because by this point Diane she's quite large, as it were, kind of like a big watermelon, But don't tell her I said that. Let's just say, so she was a county fair, glowing, beautiful, blue ribbon, grand prize watermelon. That's what she was. But she was wet and she was slippery. And so I didn't want the watermelon to hit the floor, which was a distinct possibility because at this very moment, as I'm helping her out of the shower, the building starts to shake because we're having an earthquake because it's California. And so I managed to hold on to her so she didn't hit the floor. And the earthquake lasted about 10 seconds. And as we do in California, we all just carried on as if nothing had happened. And there was no need to do anything rash, like perhaps put an earthquake kit together and put it in the trunk of your car. We would just carry on as if nothing had happened. Well, after the excitement of the earthquake and the shower were done, we realized we needed some supplies. We had come completely unprepared for the length of the time it was going to take for the turkey to be done. And so the dads graciously offered to make a Target run so they could get some snacks and some gossip magazines and some water, because we knew that it was very important, to drink a lot of water and also to catch up on Hollywood gossip. But mostly that hydration thing was important. And at this point, we'd arrived early in the morning when it was cold, and I was wearing a sweater, but now I'm hot. So I asked the dads to buy me a t-shirt. I didn't care what, buy a t-shirt at Target, bring it back. All right. Which is why for the rest of the day that Diane spent 15 hours in labor, I walked around the hospital room in a red shirt with pink hearts that said, "It's all about me." Why should Diane get all the attention? Well, the nurses work 12-hour shifts. So at 7:30 at night, Nurse Judy was back. And she was very surprised and shocked to see that the baby was still inside Diane and had not yet come out of Diane. So she took charge. Nurse Judy had a birth plan. She cranked up the Pitocin, which, if you don't know what that is, it's the magic medicine that makes the uterus go into like hyperdrive, like warp factor 10, and it's meant to just shoot that baby right out. And we were all tired. We were ready for this turkey to be done. I wanted this baby out before midnight because it was February 2nd, and I wanted a Groundhog Day baby because I love that movie, and because it felt like we'd been living this day over and over again for at least a week. Well, Nurse Judy, she knew what she was doing, and her plan worked. Things started happening. And much like at Thanksgiving, when the turkey's almost done, there's a flurry of activity. Everybody, they're washing their hands and their masks and gown, and trays with surgical equipment showed up, and a bassinet was wheeled in, and a big plastic tub to bathe the baby in once it was born. And there were shouts of, push, don't push. And I was helping Diane with her breathing. So I'm like, breathe, don't breathe. So it would appear that I actually had some important job to do, because read the t-shirt, all about me. So word had gone out to the village, and there were people gathered in the hall waiting for the big moment. And finally, at 10 o'clock, the turkey was done. Only it was a boy, and we named him Ryan. And once the shouts of, "It's a boy," it has arrived, and Diane was covered up appropriately, the crowds came in, and all of a sudden we had pizza and cigars and beverages, and somebody turned on some music, and Ryan was bathed and swaddled and snuggled with, and it was a very celebratory, festive occasion. In fact, it was so festive that Nurse Judy had to come in and tell us to turn down the music because apparently the thumping sound of "It's Raining Men" was disrupting some other woman's Beethoven birth plan. Well, 15 hours we have been there, and I don't know if Puxatawny Phil saw his shadow on that day, but we finally got to see our baby boy. Thank you.